There's an important thing that people really don't understand about the military. And I know that they don't understand it because products continue to advertise themselves as military grade. And what that means to me is that the lowest bidder possible won a contract to provide this thing that's generally weather resistant in the best times.
Hello, YouTubers and listeners. I'm Nicholas W. Fuller. I'm a writer, I'm a gamer, I'm an interviewer, and on my YouTube channel, I talk about books and games, and I look for cool ways to bring these two passions of mine together. But today, I get the wonderful opportunity to talk to my good friend, J.A. Ross. Hello, Jeremy.
Hey, Nick. How's it going?
It is going great. Always a good time to chat with you. Now, if you don't know Jeremy, stick around because we're going to get to hear all about some fun stories of his, including how his dog got on ESPN, how he was the 29th strongest man in Austin, Texas, and a whole lot more. But he's also an excellent writer, and that's actually how I came to know him. He's won honorable mentions from ElegantLiterature.com. He's a semifinalist in the Doris Betts and Thomas Wolfe writing competitions, and his debut novel, Exit Wounds, is absolute fire, let me tell you. I'm not sure when he's going to get done editing and when he's going to get to a publishing deal, but it's going to happen, and I'm going to be here to watch his whole career rise. It's going to be awesome. But then again, maybe you have seen Jeremy because he has been in a music video with 8 million views. So Jeremy, thank you for being here. How did this music video happen? Are you secretly a rock star?
Oh, that's where we start. Okay. Well, I'll start with the cheers. How about that?
Cheers, sir. What are you drinking?
I decided to go with the Blantons today.
Ooh, it's an occasion.
Yeah, this one comes to us from Writers Group, actually.
You want to tell them how that happened?
Yeah, so Nick and I are in a writers group together with two women, and three of us decided, based on the kindness of their hearts and no requests whatsoever from me, to hold writers group one Saturday morning in line, waiting for one of the very few bottles of Blanton's that gets released in North Carolina.
So this is a sort of rare bourbon, right?
Yes, it comes from the Buffalo Trace distillery. It is essentially like 10-year single barrel Buffalo Trace, but it's highly sought after. And there's essentially two different ways of getting whiskey. You can go on the secondary market, which can sometimes be very, very expensive. Or if you're in a state with an alcoholic beverage commission that governs all the sales, you'll get it at the MSRP, but it might be very difficult to get. You might be sitting outside with your laptops at 7:30 a.m., waiting in line to get one of the 6 bottles that they released in your area.
All right. So let me just paint the picture for you guys. We get together with our writing group on Saturday mornings at a little coffee shop at 7:30 in the morning. Why do we do that on Saturdays at 7:30? Because I have kids and that's when I can kind of sneak away. So thank you guys for that. But this one week, Jeremy's like, hey, you guys wouldn't want to meet out in front of the liquor store, would you? Just kidding. Or am I? Just kidding.
Unless.
Right? Yeah. And we were like, are you serious? I mean, okay, whatever. Well, our laptops will work there. So we did. We brought little lawn chairs and we sat there. And we actually have done this with Jeremy twice now. But the first time I was like, it's fine. There's not going to be I didn't know. I was, inexperienced and we almost didn't make it. Especially I almost didn't make it in line to get any space to get this delicious blandings. But yeah, we made it and we went through the line and you got the good stuff, right?
We got it. And it served us well so far.
All right, and we get to say that we had a writing group in front of a liquor store in the morning on a Saturday. But I got some lovely Teach's Peaches from a local brewery, nice wheat beer. And I should be drinking wine, but it's in my I drink and know things cup. It's good stuff.
Teach's Peaches. Is that named after Edward Teach?
Oh, that is, yep, Edward Teach, a.k.a. Blackbeard. Very awesome.
Subject of one of your short stories that I'm sure we'll release at some point.
That's actually fans. You can go to nicholaswfuller.com, sign up for my mailing list, and you can get my story Treasure right now. So there you go. But Jeremy, are you a rock star? How'd you get on a music video that has 8 million people, dude?
The song is Ella Te Quiere, which is just Spanish for She Loves You, if you are monolingual or simply not bilingual with Spanish. And the song is by Ana Victoria. And this just kind of came to be when I was living in Los Angeles. The week leading up to the first matchup between the University of Texas, Hook'em Horns, and the USC Trojans, of course, Southern California, they're in LA. First meeting that they had in something like 12 years since the 2005 national championship game at the Rose Bowl. Very highly billed game. Very, very interesting. And so a lot of my friends from Texas, alumni from university, came out to meet me in LA, and we all went to the game together. We had a good time. We lost in overtime, but we still enjoyed ourselves. And
it's about the journey.
That I want to say was sort of a random Thursday. They came in town for a little bit of time. They hadn't seen me. I'd moved 2 years prior. They didn't see a lot of me, so they wanted to come out, see LA, see the sights. Hate them.
Hate the sights. Okay.
No, we had a great time. We went to the Magic Castle. We did all sorts of things. But a friend of mine who still works in production for various film projects, but now TV, was producing, or was on the team that was producing an Ana Victoria music video. And I found out on Facebook, she simply wrote something like, "We're looking for people who look Texan."
You're like, I'm Texan.
Yeah, she was like, I don't know if I'm outing Ana Victoria here, but she was like, it's a non-union filming, so like, we're not offering compensation, but you can have an IMDb credit, which I guess you have to set up an IMDb to do that, but that's fine. And three of us.
So you could be on IMDb, but you're not right now?
Yeah, that sounds right. Or I'm just simply buried so deeply as like guy with long hair in the music video that it's very difficult to find me.
Yeah, sure. That's funny.
So we answered the call. I said, I actually have some Texans in town. Let's go do this. And it was sort of a love story, as you might assume from the name. And she's like, there's a chance that one of you will be the love interest in this video. And I was like, cool, gonna be me, right? And unfortunately, as soon as we got there, I saw the most beautiful man I've ever seen in my entire life. Just one of those, moved from like Germany to LA because everybody was like, you got to be in movies. He's like 6'4" with these like piercing blue eyes. So I was instead cast as his best friend. Though you have watched the video, right, Nick?
I hunted it down. Yeah, you're like, I mean, you're there and you're prominent, but she has given you such strong like side eye. She's like, this guy like killing my vibe.
I think I just like to say that when she walked over, she had the love interest there, but she was like, well, I don't know. What's this guy up to?
Sure.
Now, Ana Victoria was very, very sweet. We actually got a lot of time with her. She's super, super kind. We took a bunch of photos. And she was really wonderful. The song is good. She has a number of really good songs. They are all in Spanish, except for a couple cover songs, I think. But they're really great.
So were your friends in the video too, or was it just you?
Yeah. So the video sort of opens up, and you can see my buddy Rob, and who's actually a tanker in Iraq, and I met him through the Student Veterans Association at UT. It opens up with him, and unfortunately, there were others in the room, but they didn't make the cut. They got edited out. They found it on the cutting room floor, unfortunately. Probably just as they were sat in a place with lighting not too good. Nothing to do with them, just the fact.
Well, whatever. Now you can tell your friends I made the cut. All right, so you're not secretly a rock star, but you are the 29th strongest man in Austin.
I was.
You were. Maybe not anymore.
In February of 2015. Yeah.
I think that's a fun story. So tell us, like, how did you become the 29th strongest man, and what was your motivation for becoming a strongman?
So I I've had a lot of different iterations in my fitness journey, and I don't want to turn this into some sort of David Goggins fitness podcast. But so I was in the Army from 2005 to 2010, and as many people may know, there was a war on at the time, and
two of them.
So. Right, it was a common question back then. And I was actually studying Arabic at the Defense Language Institute. When
I am really excited to see how this connects to. Okay,
sure, yeah. When several of my friends and I said, "Hey, we are all learning Arabic. We suspect that they are teaching us this to send us a place that speaks Arabic." And that's where the wars are going on. So we should probably be ready for those. So a bunch of nerds scored really high on test scores and got sent out to DLI. Started getting into this neat fitness program.
This tiny little thing that no one had heard of. That's little.
Right? Honestly, no one had heard of it at that time.
I know, yeah.
But we were just down the street from Santa Cruz, California, which is where CrossFit started.
Yeah, goes by the name of CrossFit. You might have heard of it now.
Back when you could pay like $20 to drop in and get a class taught by Glassman, like that level of deep CrossFit. And we got really into that. We started to, we gained a lot of appreciation for it. And when I decided it was time to leave the Army, I started studying sports science and kinesiology, again, at the University of Texas, Hook 'em Horns. And yeah, and so I just got really interested in strength and conditioning and all of the aspects. And so I learned a lot more deeply about Olympic lifting and about powerlifting, and then eventually about this nebulous idea of strongman that's actually grown in popularity quite a bit since 2015. 2014 is when I would have been training, until was Giants Live. It was a major production company that puts on World's Strongest Man. They were doing a tour and they were stopping around at different places. And I was talked into entering the competition. I didn't want to, but I was in graduate school at the time. And as most people, as maybe people don't know, graduate students don't tend to make a lot of money. So
students in general, not, yeah.
So the person who convinced me to go ahead and do this competition, only about 2 months off of a broken finger, said, "Well, if you place in the top 30, you'll get $100," which was enough of a motivation to at least give the old college try.
Didn't he also say like a top 30 gets on TV?
And they also put, and so that was what it was. The $100 was compensation to use your name, image, and likeness on TV. The guy who won, actually a good friend of mine, and his name's Hayden. You can find him doing a lot of now. What do they call it? The Highland Games competitions. He's big on TikTok, and I don't know his his last name.
Those things are.
Oh, go ahead.
Good. No, those Highland games are crazy. Like the big, like when they're holding that giant pole and throwing it. They're like, wow,
Yeah.
how?
Yeah, and he gets after it. His name is Hayden, Hayden. Last name starts with a B. I don't want to say his whole last name because I don't know if I'm outing him. Again, it's big on Instagram, TikTok, and all that. Um, but it was really great. He won like $3,000 or whatever, and
No, nice.
we took a photo together with him holding his prize money and me holding mine. Fun old time.
What a yeah, good time, good time.
So yeah, it's so at that. So I placed 29th in the competition.
Yep,
Um,
squeaked in there.
yeah, I probably felt like I could have done better, but I was 2 months off of a broken finger, and I failed multiple times on the farmer's carry. And I said that's a good enough excuse. It's definitely not because Hayden is like 308 pounds and 10% body fat. So.
Oh, that's good. That's good. If I had a good finger, I would have been 28 strongest man.
I could have done it. I could have done it, man.
So you were on TV, but it wasn't ESPN.
It was not. No, it was local TV. Um,
But your dog has been on ESPN.
he has, yeah.
How did your dog get on? Is your dog like? Is your dog a rock star? Is your dog a strongman? Is your dog a quarterback?
So Woodhouse, who's a lovely Catahoula mix. He's he's about 90 pounds now. He was about 65 pounds at the time.
he's let him. He's fat Thor now.
Uh, I was not aware of the breed Catahoula, but they're really wonderful curs. They're cattle dogs, working dogs, hunting dogs. They're very smart. You can figure out what you want them to know. Popular enough to where they're actually the state breed of Louisiana.
Oh, how about that?
So they populate Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana and Arkansas pretty heavily. And Woodhouse was just left with all of his litter in a box and sent to Austin Pets Alive. Wonderful organization where I was able to adopt him for a grad student's salary, his grad student's budget. And what I didn't know about Catahoulas is that they climb trees. You can look this up. You can go to YouTube and just type in Catahoula climbing a tree, and sure enough, they're out there. They don't climb the way you and I would, where we imagine climbing being a very slow, iterative process. Yeah, no. They sprint directly at the tree and then continue to sprint up straight like a cartoon. And then at one point, so eventually I did finish grad school, and one of the things that I have done since is I'm an advisor for a nonprofit called Heroes Movement, which is an awesome organization that I should definitely mention. heroesmovementusa.org. You guys can check it out. We're on Instagram. That's probably me using it. We're on Twitter. That's definitely me, but we're probably not going to respond quickly because nobody interacts with our Twitter. Heroes Movement provides tailored strength and conditioning workouts to veterans at any ability level, any disability level, typically with the intention to bridge the gap between rehabilitation and building a stronger veteran community. So that takes you everywhere from rehabilitation, which a lot of times is not just physical rehabilitation. It's inpatient PTSD treatment or drug treatment, alcoholism, and giving them a support group, a built-in support group, and then small group workouts to really build out that community. Happy to be a part of that organization. And so is Neil Everett, who is, as everyone knows, and I'm sure you, Nick, could immediately say, is one of the hosts of Sports Center at Night. He does the Sports Center Top 10 that people are very familiar with. And he imparted to me that sometimes they have a really hard time figuring out what's going to go on the top 10 because they're doing one 5 days a week. And he's really, really into dogs. And I showed him some videos of Woodhouse running straight up into trees. And he was like, get me those videos. We're going to have a place for them. So Woodhouse has been on the Sports Center top 10 twice.
Amazing. That's pretty cool. I was, so one of the questions that kind of I have for writers is that it tends to be writers. There's like there is the Brandon Sanderson in the world who was like, I'm going to be a writer, and that's kind of like almost the only thing he's done, kind of almost. But most writers have done a lot of things. So yeah, you've and working out in sports have been a big part of your life. But previous, you were working at restaurants and part-time work as like a teenager. You were in the Army for 5 years, CrossFit coach and gym manager, strength and conditioning coach, exercise physiologist, and now you're an assistant professor, and you're secretary and exercise science advisor for that 501c3 Heroes movement. Did I nail it all?
You nailed it.
Which is like, I think it's interesting, kind of the journey that people go through. But it's amazing how the Heroes movement got you on ESPN. The Army background arguably got you on a music video. Like crazy how things work out, right?
Yeah. It's a wild ride. I have always, well, I don't know how much I could say always, because my philosophies have changed quite a bit over the years. But a general life philosophy that I have is that you should strive to be a well-rounded man. If you're a man, a well-rounded, whatever you are, if you are anything else, well-rounded woman, person, etc. And by that, I mean, I think you should strive to improve physically. You should strive to improve your life socially. And I also think that artistically is one of those domains. And I haven't necessarily quantified those domains, but I think that you can generally see that they're fairly different endeavors, socially and artistically, for example. It's one of the reasons I've been really heavily critical of sort of academic and artistic culture that looks down on sports quite a lot. Because I think that sports are as intrinsic to our lives as art. When an anthropologist goes and looks at an ancient community, they ask questions on what do they eat? What art did they create? How did they arrange themselves socially? And what sports did they play? And it's pretty universally studied in anthropology. Okay, what did these people do athletically? So when I'm a big fan of American football, probably could have guessed, and
bit of a giveaway.
So when people sort of look down on that, I see that as looking down on a crucial aspect of life. As much as art is a part of people's lives, I think sport can be a part of people's lives. And so you may not ever become a famous artist, or you may not ever become a famous athlete, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't participate in sport on some level, even if that's just exercising for yourself. But competitions can be really great. There are a bunch of different ways to compete. The same can be said for art. So even if you may never become a famous author, it is still beneficial to you to write. Or if you prefer to paint, you can paint. Or if you like to sing,
or music is lovely.
There are all different ways that you can participate in that very core aspect of the human experience. And what I decided to do for my artistic expression was I realized I was fairly decent at generating words on a page, and I decided to sit down and start writing. Actually, what I decided to do was talk about a book that I would write for months. until Katie Beth, my partner, got so annoyed with me. She said, "Get into your office right now and don't come out until you've written a chapter." And I started it that night, and the chapter is largely unchanged since. I had a pretty clear vision for where I was going. It's just mechanical differences that have changed. Still the first chapter, and
I was going to ask if that was actually chapter one. That's cool. Yeah, well done.
yeah, and it felt good, and it felt right to be exploring that aspect of myself. And so, regardless of what happens with Exit Wounds, title of my debut novel, regardless of what happens with my short stories, which I shop around from time to time when I feel like it, it is important to me to have participated.
That's so beautiful, actually. And like, you kind of are taking the words out of my mouth, and I'm glad that you've led it that way, because I have had the thought of like, clearly sport is such a passion for you, and I'd love to kind of hear you talk about why. And it's super interesting hearing that, because I haven't had that view of sports before. You know, I appreciate sports and I like watching it, but it's sort of, I don't know. But like, anyway, I guess I haven't appreciated it in the same way that you are, you know. But I really I like that, and I totally see where you're coming from, and I have to agree with you. It's equally as valuable as creating art. You know, it's an expression of what we can do. You know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people might be looking for an in to sports. It's not that they're necessarily averse to it. It's they've had some sort of bad experience. They went to a high school football game and they said, "What is a first down?" And people said, "What are you doing? You don't even know what a first down is." No one was able to sort of bring them on board. But that in for
Or
people. Go ahead.
or like, you know, being super young and playing little league, or like my experiences playing basketball were not great. I have a first place trophy for like playing basketball when I was 10 or something, and I did not earn that trophy. The rest of my team was pretty good, but I was like, literally the coach's son was like, "Listen, Nick, if you can start hitting your free throws, I'll be your friend." I was like, okay, you know, trying. It was bad. It was,
That's
but yeah, yeah,
um, yeah, and there's there's a lot to be said about the differences in the American model of sports versus different European international models. But that's not really what we're here to talk about. I think a lot of people need an in, and for some
yeah,
people, that in is just understanding the personalities and the people involved and the real human element. And for some people, that is
yeah.
having really wonderful experiences at the university they attended, and that's sort of where they came into their
Purple
own. And so
horns.
they were, yes, indeed, where they sort of came into their own and realized and gathered this appreciation for it with 100,000 fans who are also feeling the same way.
Right.
And sport is just really interesting and beautiful in the way that it can create those unique shared experiences that you can share with even with people who weren't there but get it. They'll say, "Oh, were you at that game? Were you at that championship? Were you there?" And even if they're not a fan, they'll be like, "This is important to him." It's if anything else, it's a way to make small talk. You watched the game last night? Yeah.
Yeah, right, right. I was there was a little video recently from John Green, one of the Green brothers, Vlog brothers, whatever. He was talking about how he took his son to England and they were watching like a soccer game, and he's like, "It was miserable because we lost horribly, but
Yeah.
like everyone together was miserable, and it was such a pure experience. It was nice, you know." So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I want to get back into sports eventually, but you worked at a restaurant before you were in the army? What, like, tell me a little bit about like these really early jobs. I want to hear. Did you have like the crap? Were you washing dishes?
I was dishwasher at one point, cashier, fry cook, busboy. That pretty much covers it, I think. I never waited tables. I have a lot of friends who have and do, but I never did. No, I did not grow up with very much money. We didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. It was a very small town in central Texas. Wasn't a whole lot going on. And so I started working at the age of 15, largely to bring money into, not just into my own bank account, but to the family. I was regularly sending money home through 5 years of the army. Even after that, so until I was 24 years old,
Wow.
and I never really thought anything of it. It was just, you go, you have a thing to do, you make, what was it, $5.15 an hour at the time, I think. At one point, I got a raise to like $5.25 an hour. It was awesome. and you learn a lot of things. You learn about how to deal with people, and you learn how to fry chicken. And I worked at a smattering of restaurants, pizza restaurant, chicken restaurant. Drove a delivery driver for Pizza Hut for a little bit.
One of my favorite, like, not career jobs was being a delivery driver at a Chinese place. It's like, like, you just grab the bag, you get in the car, you listen to your tunes, and you have like Google Maps, whatever, it takes you where you need to go. Although, story for another interview, but like, I did have a gun pulled on me twice while I was delivering Chinese food, and that was not ideal.
Oh, I managed to avoid that through delivering pizzas. But what I did find was interesting was you have this sort of Hollywood perception of what delivering pizzas must be like. And there's just like speed metal playing, and you're holding on for dear life, and you're just blazing through red lights because these people need to get their pizza immediately. And on the very first day, I realized like there's actually no rush. It's not really your money. But more importantly, like, it's better to deliver all of your pizzas without any damage to your vehicle or person.
Pro tip. Yeah.
Perhaps even over the course of years, depending on how long you hold the position. So
Right. That's wild. And definitely, I agree. Yeah, don't damage your person or your vehicle. So you joined the army. You were in the army for 5 years. You did that right after high school,
correct.
Right? And that's actually kind of a good segue, because one of, I know, your favorite things to talk about in the military is how awesome the vehicles are in the military. Right? Right?
There's an important thing that people really don't understand about the military. And I know that they don't understand it because products continue to advertise themselves as military grade. And what that means to me is that the lowest bidder possible won a contract to provide this thing that's generally weather resistant in the best of times. There are, however, some exceptions to that. Sleeping bags, one exception. That sleeping bag was appreciated so much it made its way into exit wounds. And one of
Tuckerized your sleeping bag. I love it. Okay.
Yeah. One of those things is the vehicle, specifically the Humvees, are the ones that I'd really truly wax poetic about. Whatever they did when they started making those vehicles, I mean, they've only. I don't know how many iterations there have been of them. I don't know really how long it was taken away from Jeep, but they're just crushing it, and that company needs to continue to do it. These things will drive over anything, through anything, under any condition. If you take the bumper off a Humvee, you can look this up. I'm not making it up. You can drive it into a wall, and then it will drive up the wall until it tips over. It simply just has the capacity to do anything. I wanted to buy a demilitarized one to take out on the beaches here in this great state of North Carolina. But I got a Bronco instead. It would have been two different vehicles. You can't daily drive a Humvee, so it would have been like a whole thing.
It's a bit much. It's hard to park that, getting your groceries.
But they really,
But
truly are fantastic. And in some of my favorite experiences were being very irresponsible in Western Afghanistan, um, which this will sound very alien to a lot of people who were in the military and were deployed. But I was part of the troop surge to Afghanistan in 2009 to 2010. And we went into places in the country that were, first of all, had not really been developed since the Russians were there in the 80s. And second of all, they were simply not built up. We didn't even have really great perimeter security around the entire airfields and things. So um, we would kind of get out um, outside the gate of one area that we knew was secure, and we had to go to another one that was secure, and the middle was like kind of secure. But when you needed to go somewhere, you'd say, well, where is the 82nd Airborne compound? And you would say, it's kind of that way. So you would just drive that way over the various hills and rocks and blown up airplanes and things that were all around that. And that was really great because you would just pick a direction and you would just drive, and you just knew this vehicle could handle it. And sometimes there would be a tree in the way. And sorry, if you're a tree hugger, you would just simply say, no tree, you move. And you would just kind of just go through and just did your own thing.
the tree would be like, you're right. That was my mistake. No, you had the right of way on that one. I'm sorry. That's wild. That does, yeah. I'm not too keen on the getting shot at thing, but that so far hasn't been a part of the story. So, like, the off-roading part sounds pretty exciting, Yeah.
It can be. Getting shot can be exciting too. It really just depends. Getting shot, though, I hear that's terrible. Knock on wood, never happened to me, but I hear it sucks.
That doing a lot of work. Yep. Yep. All right, so Army 5 years, CrossFit, etc. You exercise physiologist, assistant professor, where you're kind of doing research on, physiology, that sort of thing. And now you're not doing the strongman thing, but you are working out with kegs.
Yeah. When I feel up to it.
How did you start working out with kegs?
Well, I started through strongman. So kegs are a pretty common strongman implement. And when I say kegs, I'm referring to the very same beer kegs that every bar and brewery in your town has. And you simply fill them with different different things. So you fill them with gravel. You can fill them with sand, with water, with different things that will give you different levels of density to this device, most of which kind of slosh around and move around and become unstable. And so they can be very heavy, filled with water. They're about 190 pounds. And so they can be very heavy, but they can also really slosh around and force you to stabilize. So they become really great training implements. And I closed on my first house, this house, on March 17th of 2020. And right around March 17th of 2020, all of the gyms were also closing. And
there's this little event happening called the pandemic. You may remember it. Yeah, right. Yeah, I do. I remember it.
And I simply couldn't resign myself. I have a knee injury that's become quite chronic over time. I guess that's the definition of chronic. Where I can't really just go for a run. That's not really in the cards for me. And I was not willing to just forego exercise for as long as for the 2 weeks it took to slow the spread. And but home gym equipment was in high demand. It was nearly impossible to find. But I knew how to use improvised implements because I had been training in strongman for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to a brewery in town, actually Flytrap Brewing. Those guys were great. named after the Venus flytrap, which is native to only 100 miles around this area, which I
My
didn't know
wife
until I
is
moved
like
there.
my wife is like a plant and animal nut, and that's like her new favorite thing about Wilmington.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
um, yeah, native, not like it
yeah,
moved here from somewhere else
no,
and also lives in a different place. No, it really
no,
just only lives here. That's super
you
interesting.
know, right? They do say like 70 or 100 miles around, but that can't be totally right because there's no way.
Ocean out there.
Exactly. There's one's floating, going like that fly's gonna come someday. But anyway, dumb
But
joke.
there are also a lot of islands out there, and that in that space in the south
Fair,
outer banks. No,
fair.
Venus flytraps are actually something kind of like pirates. We talked about Edward Teach already. In that you imagine pirates to be very foreign and exotic, the same way that you imagine Venus flytraps to be very foreign and exotic. And so when somebody tells you, actually, Blackbeard was in North Carolina, you say, what, for like a day? Or that was where they were doing stuff.
What if what if it's actually that North Carolina is much more exotic than we just think it is? What if
The curse of familiarity, right?
right? Yeah. Maybe we're exciting and we don't know.
So to wrap that up, Flytrap Brewing,
Kicks.
they sold me 4 of their kegs for literally what I had in my wallet, which was about $65. Um, and I brought them home, um, trained with them essentially exclusively with kegs. Though I had a heavy kettlebell and I had a sandbag. I had stuff. I knew what to do with like just implements I could get my hands on. But I had mostly the heaviest lifting I did with was those kegs for a year. And I wrote a piece for Inside Fitness magazine after that year of which was called something to the effect of a 500-pound deadlift from kegs or something is what I called it. Um, the Inside Fitness magazine decided to change the title to It's a Kegger, which is fine. And the general concept is I was deadlifting around 500 pounds when this all kicked off. And after a year of training only with these kegs, my heaviest being filled with water, again, about 190 pounds, I was like, well, let's just see. Let's just try to max out on deadlift, see where we get, what happens. And got 505 pounds up, smooth as butter. And I was like, I thought for sure I was taking several steps backwards. This is really impressive. Um, Wrote a piece about it. Didn't really get paid, but whatever.
We're gonna have to find that piece and put a link in the comments. It's pretty rad.
Sure.
But nice. Yeah. That's I mean working out with kegs, strongman, army, off roading. It's good stuff. And we've talked about the Longhorns, Hook'em Horns, a couple times, right? Went there after the army, right?
Correct.
And that was I'd say a good experience.
It was. Yeah. Truth be told, as a kid who was in high school for 9/11, who joined the army very shortly out of high school, who worked in intelligence collection, not analysis. It is an important distinction. And I really thought, I said, well, look, I speak Arabic. This is a clearly marketable skill. I actually looked at going into federal agencies right out of the military, but I got the very good advice from, I knew some DEA agents. Unfortunately, both of them were killed during that time. Rest in peace. We did CrossFit together. It was. I'm happy for their memories. But I spoke to both of them, and I also the CIA, the big one, has recruiters and they've got people everywhere, and they've got people who, if you are showing really strong interest, will come and talk to you and kind of figure out who you are and what you're about. And so I spoke to one of them as well. And
are you adding yourself right now? How much can we say? Like, you're gonna have to kill me after this.
I no longer even have a security clearance, so everything I say is outdated and old news. Who knows what they're even up to?
Anyway,
but I got what I consider to be very good advice, which was, look, the intelligence community is not going anywhere. So get out of the Army, use this post 9/11 GI Bill that is fantastic. Really did wonders. Go, they were like, where do you want to go? I was like, well, I'd like to live in Austin. They're like, go to some school in Austin and party and, like, meet the kids. They'll all think you're super cool because you're a veteran, which is not necessarily exactly how people reacted. But go live that life for 4 years. When you're done, you'll have better career prospects in federal agencies because they are typically looking for somebody with a 4-year degree, and that will limit you eventually. And you'll have gotten to do college for a little bit, which is exactly what I did. I applied to the only school I knew of in Austin. Sounds like a joke, but that is true. And I got in. And about 6 months to a year in, I was like, hey, wait, can we cuss on this? This war shit is for the birds. I don't want to do any of this. I was majoring in Arabic, a language that I already spoke. And I was like, this sucks. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to work in this. I would sit there in Arabic class and think about going to the gym later. And I said, what if I just studied that instead? Let's see where that takes me.
Nice.
And it was great. And that experience, along with several others, is really what I was sort of implying when I said you get these connections with a university that have more to do, I think, about what you went through as a person and the growth that you experienced while you were there, far more than any brand, any athletics program that they might have. And I have always connected that time in my life and the very great experiences I had making friends and going to football games, volleyball games, basketball games, baseball games with them. And so when I see that brand, when there's other things going on, there's parts of my heart that are connected to it that have nothing to do extrinsically with the degree that's hanging on my wall. So yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. I was able to do a lot of interesting things and accomplish that. And, I'd go back. So
I'd go back. Well, I asked you this question once before, and I thought your response was pretty fun and funny. I'm a little disappointed that you have given such a heartfelt, description of your experience as a Longhorn, because it sort of colors this. But still, what do you love more, Jeremy? Longhorn football or bourbon?
Or bourbon. Well, I love bourbon. I visit Kentucky at least once a year.
Which is where you're a professor from, even though you live here in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Correct.
Professor
I work for the University of Kentucky. It's a very confusing thing. I don't really at this point, this far into the video, people are just going to get completely lost on that topic. I still have people asking me, like, how's Kentucky all the time? But yes.
Whatever. You do research and you're not at the university.
The way I put it, to provoke the ire of, we've already established my background by now. The way I put it is we had a very well-known researcher at UT when I was there. And and he was prominent in researching baboons, the like psychosocial elements of baboon culture. He was the guy for that. And so he was a professor at the University of Texas, but he lived predominantly in Africa because that's where the baboons live. My baboons are Marine. So, I just want to say, I say that joke to the Marines all the time. Yeah. They also like it.
Every one of I've known Marines. They would laugh. Every one of them I know would laugh.
They love it. So,
that's funny.
I love bourbon. I wouldn't consider myself a collector, though a lot of people who come to my house would.
You're right. I was gonna say
I don't have a vault or anything. I don't, and they're.
But you do have a cabinet, and it is full.
quite the bourbon cabinet. I try to force myself to chip away at it, not just drink the cheap things, break out the better stuff, which I do.
What a burden! What a burden!
Yeah. Oh. And I love bourbon. It's great. And
but Longhorn football also amazing. So
I would physically pass away without the Longhorns at this point. It is.
You sound like my 9-year-old son right now.
It is such a crucial. It is my happy place that I go to. My season tickets in Darrell K. Royal Memorial Stadium. I have logins from people I know in Texas so that I can get the Longhorn network that's not really available out of state. I'm excited for them to move the SEC so that I can start seeing games that are played a lot closer to where I am. It is one of the pure joys in my life. And if you're an Aggie or a Sooner out there, I'm not saying anything bad about you. I'm just saying we do have a winning record in football against you. So.
It's like I say, and I've said in this recording, and I've said elsewhere that like we meet at 7:30 because I'm a father. But I feel like it's actually also. A big boon for you that we meet at 7:30 in the morning because that time there's no sports happening.
Well, I kept that from you for a really long time. So because my baboons are Marines and Marines like to work out very early, I typically also have to get up very early during the week. And it can be difficult to toggle that to a typical weekend schedule. So it's not that hard for me to get up and do something at 7:30. And even though we were arranging writers group in, I want to say it was March, and
2022,
yeah. And even though it was March, I knew that anything I committed to do on a Saturday, I would not be able to do during the fall unless it was early enough. Because here on the East Coast, we are blessed to not have kickoffs that start until noon for college, 1 for the NFL. And I was like, well, that's pretty safe. I can probably get away with that.
We nailed it.
And also at some point, I am going to get the faithful, the Texas X's in the Cape Fear area together to watch football together. I did that when I was in LA. We would get 200 people in a bar. Cabo Cantina, now defunct on...
It's because you're not there anymore. They lost all their business.
What
happened to Jeremy was bringing us 200 people.
We had a noise complaint one time at a bar. The bar got a noise complaint.
I mean, what else can I say? But bravo.
So even just recognize, even if I'm not just saying, oh, I want to go watch games. If there's a chance that I need to go host games somewhere, well, I can't be at writers group. And that's the more professional, responsible way of saying it.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. Yeah. But yeah, it turns out that you have written a book. I want to mention that a little bit. Like, what was that whole process of writing a book like for you?
Yeah.
This
So
after that point where like Katie Beth was like, "Get over there, stop bothering me."
go write that book. Don't come
Right?
out until you finish a chapter.
Did she just keep doing that, like 30 times?
No, I don't know if she knew. Here's what I suspect. Here's what I suspect her take on it was.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, he's going to go in there and either get started and say, I have to finish this. Or he's going to get in there and try to write something and say, okay, my bad. I can't actually do this.
Turns out writing a book is hard.
It is exceptionally difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But it did, I took it one day at a time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what I told her at the time, I had a pretty good idea of what the story would look like. So we talk about, pantsers and planners, and I've said many times I am a pantser, which is true, but I knew where the story needed to go. In fact, I knew how it needed to end, and I would tell her how it needed to end, and she would say, you can't end the story that way. That is a terrible ending to the story. And I would say, I don't know that it works any other way. That is the only way the story ends. In fact, while writing Exit Wounds, I tried repeatedly to end the story in a different way. And I was like, no, this is the right answer. It's not the only possible answer, but it is the right one narratively. So I wrote it mostly from beginning to end. Mostly as a pantser does. This is our setting. I know the end point, and I sort of went through that while just trying to be true to my own experience and to the experiences of people I know and am close with. It was in many ways a replacement for therapy for me. And I don't want to disparage therapy, but I'm not very good at it. It's not the therapist's fault. It never really worked for me. I don't really know that I use it properly. But there are just a lot of really heavy elements in
I
the
could
story.
see you
Go ahead.
in a therapist's office going like, "Do you have bourbon? Because this will go a lot easier." And they're like, "No, sorry, they didn't." I could anyway, but I could also. I mean, yeah, there's obviously your main character is not a stand-in for you, but there's a lot of your personal experience in this story.
Correct.
Yeah.
And um, and so yeah, our story follows a post 9/11 veteran who spent time in the 82nd Airborne. So far, we're right on in line with me, although he's from Oklahoma. I'm not. And that is sort of where our similarities end. Our main character found that he was able to. Oh, he does speak Arabic, although that's barely in the story, but it's in there. One of those little things, something like readers like to say, like, "Oh, wow, oh, he can read this Arabic. That must mean he knows all sorts of different things." And so, in some ways, it was really to kind of honor. I've worked a lot with special operations, and I know people who have gone into let's just say very special operations, sort of people who get into more secret squirrel activities, and now they'll hit me up on Facebook and their names are always different, and I have to play a little guessing game to figure out who the hell I'm actually talking to. And so I wanted to say, what would happen if the person who maybe I sort of was got into really deep into the war on terror from a deep special operations standpoint, and then skipped all of the experiences I had in undergrad and in grad school, and then just immediately took a job at the exact same hospital I happened to work out after grad school, what would that person's experience look like? And can I give what I feel is an honest representation of the post 9/11 experience through that lens, which I think that I thought that I could, and I hope that I did. Because I think it's something that's not talked about, and I think it's something that's not in literature, is military, and perhaps even more especially veterans in media and in culture are very one-dimensional. They've really got one thing going on. It's usually PTSD, and if it's not PTSD, it's that they're just like hardcore killing machines, but they don't seem to have, if they have PTSD, they have empathy, but they don't have the ability to commit violence. And if they are very violent, they don't have any empathy. And I just don't think that's representative of how people are in general. And I wanted to showcase a character who had a lot of depth, had a lot of complexity, but was operating in a world that didn't understand necessarily how he felt or what he needed.
Right.
And so that was kind of what I tried to do with Exit Wounds in general, with a large element, because I do love fantasy and the supernatural and all of that. I wanted to pit this story as a battle of good versus evil, of heaven versus hell, and perhaps in a way where heaven versus hell and good versus evil were not the same thing.
Ooh. What interesting framing. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I read it, and you nailed it. So,
Thank you.
Well done. Jeremy, I almost forgot. There's this one bit that I want to make a recurring segment. I think I'm going to call it "How Dare They." So it's right. So I think you're going to close out like a lot of my interviews with this wonderful "How Dare They" segment. So it's important to remember, as authors and creatives in general, that our work is subjective, and no one work can possibly be loved by everyone, right? So to that end, I asked you ahead of time, Jeremy, one of your favorite books. And of course, you said Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, which is, can't go wrong with Neil Gaiman. But it turns out for some people, I guess you can go wrong with Neil Gaiman. So I'm going to read you a 1-star review that someone left for Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. And your job, Jeremy, is to, feel free to jump in, feel free to cut me off, but definitely I want a response of how dare they? Are you ready, Jeremy?
Let's do this.
All right.
Wait.
Yeah, right.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay. This is a long review, so yeah.
Okay, do a dramatic reading.
I hate Richard Mayhew. Is it Mayhew? I don't know.
Yeah, that's how I pronounced it.
All right. Richard Mayhew is among the worst protagonists in anything I've read, played, or watched. His only redeeming feature in the entire book is that he stops to help someone lying in the street after nearly tripping over them, and that's just what any decent person would do, not something deserving of any particular praise. Aside from that, he exists only to be the dullest, stupidest, least relatable audience stand-in ever. He makes Arthur Dent look like a take-charge man of action. It becomes very clear early on that when the fairy people use terms like the names of railway stations or bridges or whatever, that they mean something else, but Richard has to keep making the dumb assumption that they mean the normal non-Wonderland version. And he has no apparent motivations or will of his own. He just goes along with whatever's happening. I assume it keeps going. I assume you agree with all this so far, right?
I mean, I see where he's coming from.
No, how dare they? Even on the few occasions where he does attempt to do something, he still does the dumbest things. For example, after discovering that basically everything in Oz is dangerous, Richard hires a mysterious guide who won't tell him up front what the payment will be. That does seem kind of dumb, actually. Yeah. And it annoyed me especially early on when he first found that he'd become invisible to normal people, that he decided to track down Dor, not to demand that she make amends for messing up his life, but to see if she needed any more help, and because he hoped she might be pleased to see him. When he does bring up the fact that she's basically killed him, it's in the most apologetic way and he still wants to help her. That's how that went? Really?
I don't feel like, and it's been a couple years since the last time I read Neverwhere. I don't feel like he went to Door to be like, "Hey, my bad. What's going on?" I feel like he went to Door to be like, "Hey, what's going on?" But he does deal with her very softly for two reasons. One, she was an incredibly fragile and in danger young woman who seemed very frail, and two, we were setting up spoilers for people who haven't read it. We were setting up a bit of I would go with a strong implication of a love story. There's not really a romance in it, but there's a very clear desire for him to be with Dor. And I think that can be magical. That can be primal. That's a great way for something where, as the critic notices when they say, please mind the gap, that they're actually talking about monsters. And when every normal thing has some sort of fantastical element, I think it's perfectly natural to add some magic element to the potential romance.
Perfect. Yeah. So there's more, and other characters aren't much better. The Marquis is smug and obnoxious. Dor is ridiculously naive. Krupp and Vandemar are pretty one-dimensional, and because they mostly don't do actually anything, not nearly as creepy as they seem like they should be. Is all tracking? You agree with all this, right?
I agree that the Marquis is, what was it, creepy and
no, smug and obnoxious for the Marquis.
Smug and obnoxious. However, it's clear that that's what Mr. Gaiman intended for him to be. He's literally taking the form of rags as we meet him, and he's coming up into the 6 foot tall figure and saying, "I'm the Marquis." Like that's clear what's going on. Dor, again, we've established, very innocent. And Krupp and Vandemar, as one-dimensional, really just dismisses how much was given to these two henchmen who were very clearly acting as henchmen, and doesn't, I don't know if the critic gets to this, but it's a bit of a mystery as to who the henchmen are actually serving, and it comes as quite a surprise to a lot of people. So identifying them as one-dimensional, I think, so Mr. Krupp and Mr. Vandemar are, when they're introduced, it's one of my favorite character introductions of all time. Nice. At least from like that third party omniscient introduction where the narrator is not identified, but he's telling you who these people are and gives us one of the most beautiful introductions I've ever seen.
Is that the one where he says like Krupp and Vandemar, they look like this and he looks like this, and like you tell the difference between this and this?
Yeah,
and then,
Mr. Vandemar is always hungry, and Mr. Krupp is in there. He wears the skulls of ravens on his fingers. Yes, that one.
Right.
And then at the end, it says there are 4 ways to tell Mr. Krupp and Mr. Vandemar apart. You're going to have to look it up on your own to read it. And then at the very last reason, he says, and finally, they look nothing at all alike.
right. Yeah, that is actually, I love that too.
It's very Gaiman flourish.
How could you not like give it 2 stars just for that alone? But they go on. Then there's the plot, and apparently this person disagrees with you. It's rather similar to Alice in Wonderland, and that stuff just happens for no particular reason, seemingly just as the author thought of it. Not sure if this particular reviewer understands how writing works, but anyway, until you get to the utterly unsurprising revelation of who the villain is. And once you do know, the plot makes even less sense if you think about it, because there's no reason for most of the things that happened. The villain could have gotten what he wanted with a much less circuitous path.
I want to know what he thinks the path should have been. In one way, I think he's having a trouble like wedding the idea that Mayhew is, while he is the point of view that we get from this, he's not. It's not a chosen one story. It's not a story of like, here's our hero that is going to fix everything. He arrives at just the right time. He does just the right things, but largely he's just he is along for the ride in an incredibly scary and like dangerous story where he's trying to accomplish things and manages to do it. Whereas the villain, he's just pursuing Door the entire time. That is his goal. I shouldn't have even said he. We didn't establish a gender for the villain, but it's actually rather genderless villain in general. But that I kind of digressing here. It's real. The conflict is really between Door and the villain, who we're going spoiler free and not saying who it was. And I don't think that he sort of varies at any point in his ability or in his desire to try to discover her. So I'd actually be interested to hear what less circuitous means this person thinks should have been undertaken. Unless the less circuitous means Gaiman don't tell us a story, which I suppose is always an option.
Right. Yeah, you could just be like, and then everything was fine on like page 2. You know, that's always an option when you're writing a story. But
yeah, why did any of this have to happen? Well, I am gonna just blow your mind right now. None of this did happen. This was a story that was born in someone's mind, and then they put it onto a page, and then we read it, and then we had a similar vision directly into our mind, and that's what writing is. That's what makes it so beautiful.
Are you telling me he was, in fact, just putting things down in the story as they came to it? Oh my god! Anyway, alright, well, how dare they? Jeremy, thank you for chatting with me. It's been fun both times.
Happy to help.
Yep. And thank you for watching. If you want to see more of Jeremy, please smash the like button and subscribe to my channel, because Jeremy doesn't have an online presence yet, so he's going to piggyback off mine for a little bit until he gets it set up. But if you like Jeremy, you'll definitely see more of him on here. Thanks again for watching, and if no one's told you today, you're an absolute legend.